Here is my zoology from my comic U.Otale. If you don't know, it's a small comic that I made videos of in my YouTube channel, which you can watch later, but for now, you will experience all the magnificent creatures from the island of Nirvana. I hope you enjoy my creatures. The great oak elk. This species is unique because of its 4 antlers instead of 2 that resemble tree branches, its big size, and unique color coat. This size has never been seen in the wild ever since the Ice Age, since it's very similar to the extinct Irish elk. They mostly spend their time in open plains because of their huge horns, but they do visit the forests to find good sources of food like nuts and fruits. They're very gentle giants, but provoked they will stampede or attack. Next up, the K-line, possibly one of the most strangest creatures in the islands of Nirvana. Even though it looks like a giant fluffy lion with bright colors, it is not. It actually is more closely related to sheep and goats. The evidence for this is its horns and back legs, since they have hooves. These creatures are actually really popular because of their soft manes, which is even softer than chinchillas or cashmere, which makes farmers domesticate them to sell their fur. And by that, they're treated just like sheep. They shave off their manes and use them to make cloth. People have discovered many behaviors of the K-lines, which people describe to be similar to a cat and a dog. A little fun fact about the K-line is that Sarah has one as a pet. Her name is Jean, and she's really sweet and fluffy and kind of overprotective over Sarah. Next up, the Aurora parrotfish. This is a very unique looking fish since it has tiny metallic blue scales on a transparent body and has a beak and tiny thin feelers on the front of its fins. This fish mostly spends its time in the coral reefs, but is very bashful and shy in the day, so it's really rare to see them during the day. But at night, they come out and use their bioluminescence to illuminate their areas, and they mostly feed on algae that grows around the coral reefs. Even though it acts a little bit like a parrotfish, it actually isn't. It's just a type of transparent fish that has developed a beak and a coral reef life. The river heifer. The river heifer is a very interesting semi-aquatic mammal. It is known to be a vegetarian, but actually it's really playful considering it likes to be in groups. The river heifer usually eats vegetation from the water, but occasionally it also eats terrestrial plants. They're not really that agile on land, but they don't let that stop them from exploring around. They're very gentle creatures, but I do not advise you getting too near to river heifer. Like every animal, they have a defense mechanism, and they have very sharp canines to defend themselves. And the river heifer got its name is because of how important it is to its ecosystem. While eating a lot of vegetation, it also fertilizes it while grazing. The diamond quail. The bird of paradise of Nirvana. This bird is very commonly known mostly because of its cool feathers and mating dance. The females might not be as colored, but they're still a very important part of the bird's life, since it's their job to judge for good genes for future generations. The diamond quail was given its name because of the diamond shapes in its quills on the forehead and on the tail. Fact about the diamond quail is that they mate for life, which is kind of rare with dancing birds. The sea aphid. A rather odd yet adorable creature. It is very small and a little bit bioluminescent. This little creature is a very important part of the Nirvana environment, which its job is to clean up gunk like sea snot, bacteria, or anything of that stuff. They mostly spend their time floating around in the water and, just hanging around and eating gunk. Sea aphids are around the size of a penny, and they're a pretty big mascot in certain places of Nirvana, considering of their cute little faces with their two tiny black dot eyes and little circle necklace. Parakeet. Probably one of the most exotic looking parakeets in the world, considering that it has that really brightly colored crest on the end of its beak. This bird has been given its name because of the bright yellow spot on its chest, which kind of looks like a sunny side up egg. This bird lives in the rainforests of Nirvana and mostly feeds on certain fruits and even socializes with humans or monsters. Even though it's a social bird, like many birds, it is not afraid to bite while it's provoked or tested. The banded platypus. Yes, even platypus are native to these islands. The difference between the banded platypus and the platypus that lives in Australia is that it's longer, slightly thinner, and it has a white band down its back. Other than that, it's just as odd as the platypus, having a poisonous bar on the end of its feet and lays eggs. Yeah, a mammal that lays eggs. Apparently that's a thing. Up next, the leafy gharial. Gharials are a very rare type of caiman, and they also live in the islands of Nirvana, alongside with the sea heifers. Don't worry, they're not really in the main menu. Gharials, like always, they feed on fish, but since this gharial is smaller than the average gharial, it also developed a kind of a camouflage patterns to hide in its swampy habitat. Just because they're small does not mean they're fierce, so I would not recommend putting your hand near them. The clouded saber, one of the most interesting cats that live in Nirvana, a descendant from the saber-toothed tiger. This cat has developed a way to live in a rainforest life by having large ears and long limbs and decreasing its size to make it more nimble in the forest floor. This cat also possesses the ability to climb and usually hunts fish, birds, and small mammals. This cat is very cool. The Goldgill salamander. This salamander usually lives in the woods and streams near big mud puddles, hence the brown coloring. But when they come out, they reveal their bright yellow gills and patterns. This salamander is also known to have the longest tail in the salamander kingdom, and also one of the few who still have their gill flaps. I think it's actually very cute. The Bowline. The Bowline is one of the most interesting creatures in Nirvana since it lives in a hyperactive volcano island. Since the volcano is active mostly all the time, a lot of rocks fall from the sky and into the ground. Because of this, the Bowline has evolved thick skin and also bone that creates a shield to protect itself. The bowline is one of the few carnivores there besides small lizards and certain types of mammals and other reptiles. But other than that, the bowline is the top predator, being around the size of the average dog, and is a carnivorous marsupial, kind of like the thylacine. The Wallaby. The Wallaby is actually a close cousin to giraffes, since its ancestor also ended up in Nirvana. The Wallaby, since it lived in a colder and more thick forest environment, it did not become as tall as its cousin, but it's still a very big mammal with long fluffy fur, still possessing a few traits that even the giraffe has, like a long purple tongue, two big antlers. One thing that the wallaby has that the giraffe doesn't is a special hoof in the back of its legs, which helps it reach things like fruits or nuts. The Twilight moth, possibly one of the coolest insects in Nirvana. The Twilight moth has been given its name because of its bioluminescent rings on the wings. The Twilight moth is a very cute moth. It probably looks like the average moth until you turn off the lights. Another interesting thing about the moth is that its common color is orange, but when one is born with albinism, it is turned white. This also affects its bioluminescence, creating a whole different color. So, once in a while in a sky full of green eyes, you might find some blue eyes. The boulder crab is one of the biggest crabs yet discovered. The boulder crab can be almost as big as a car. The boulder crab was given its name because it mostly camouflages in rivers by looking like boulders. But at night, just like hippos, they come out to feed, and during the day, they go back in the water to filter feed the rest of the day. So most of their life is basically eating. The boulder crabs in Nirvana are a little bit in trouble considering that they have a parasite that makes their shells soft and not make them as big, which makes them vulnerable. When boulder crabs are babies, they're incredibly small. When they're babies, they're around the size of a ping pong ball. Their eggs look like. Other than that, they're very cool crabs and can feed a family of 10 if somebody found one. The Nirvana seagull is bigger and slightly more colorful than other seagulls around the world. This seagull is mostly known to feed on crustaceans, but of course, like every other seagull, it is not afraid to steal your lunch. The Nirvana seagull is known to be the top predator of the boulder crab when the boulder crabs are either infected by the parasite or babies. Because of this, the Nirvana seagull has developed a stronger beak than the ones in the rest of the world, so it can actually crunch its food. Moa, one of the biggest birds in the world yet to live, and the only moa of its species still alive. The crested moa is really a sight to see, besides its size and bright colors. Its egg is almost the same size as a basketball, which totally kicks out the thing of the ostrich being the biggest eggs in the world. Moa is a gentle giant and kind of an omnivore. It eats fruits, nuts, and occasionally mushrooms and worms. Other than that, I don't really recommend getting too comfortable with the crested moa, because if it sees you as a danger, it won't hesitate to attack, either by picking or worse, kicking. Since its kick is even more powerful than an ostrich, it is more than capable of breaking a bone or two. Next up, the bird of paradise. The bird of paradise is actually a very interesting bird, camouflaging to look like the flower, the bird of paradise. Because of this, it depends on how the species lives. If it lives in a field filled with yellow flowers of paradise, it will look like that. But if it's in a different color of flower of paradise, it will mimic that color instead. These birds are incredibly shy, but other than that, if they need to escape, they'll just fly for it. They're mostly known to eat fruits from the ground and have a little bit of toucan behavior by throwing berries as a game of catch to socialize with one another. I would say this is a pretty cool bird. Last but not least, the Nirvana speckled pearl beetle. This beetle is very small and cute, and it's given its name because of its round body and it shines just like a pearl. The pearl beetle is a pretty common prey to a lot of birds and animals, but if it does feel threatened, it will either fly away or stop, drop, and roll. Nirvana speckled beetles are also known to have a marking in their head to tell which gender is which. Females have a slightly different pattern from males.
Hi guys, this is the longest video I've made in a while. Well, I hope you liked it and I hope you get to hear this. The only reason why I'm not making comic dubs is because I don't have a microphone, and as you can see in this video, the audio can get pretty choppy without it. So by the next year, after I get my microphone, I will start making comic dubs again. I'll make your Hollow Knight dub the first thing so far, and for the rest, I'll make whatever you recommend or whatever I feel like would be a good impression on you guys. Thank you for being patient, and well, I hope you enjoy your holidays. Bye!